Hey everyone, welcome back to JD Does Dev. I'm JD, and in this video we're continuing our Docksal series with part 2, Intro to Docksal, History and Why It's Great. So let's dive right into our Intro to Docksal. Now, big question you may be asking, unless you've been following along, is what's a Docksal? Well, Docksal is a containerized development tool that's set up for web application developments. Docksal uses Docker and Docker Compose to create reusable application development environments that can be shared across all developers, as well as for testing and even potentially production environments. Now, a brief history of Docksal. It began its life as an open source development management tool created by FFW, an agency, at ffwagency.com, known as Drude, D-R-U-D-E, known for Drupal Development Environment. The description from the Drude introduction blog post says that it brings together common development tools, minimizes configuration, and ensures environment consistency everywhere in your continuous integration workflow. Initially, this was an internal tool for them, but being the open source advocate that they are, FFW released it into the wild for anyone to use and benefit. Now, after a bit of time, it was expanded to include more than just Drupal. The name Drude was no longer valid as it once was. The expansion included out-of-the-box support for WordPress, standalone HTML files, or any other PHP projects. But over time, it's grown into a powerful, robust, and highly configurable development tool used by developers around the world to speed up their development time and help eliminate it worked on my local issue. At the time of this recording, there are 46 contributors to the core Docksal project, several others who contribute to images, add-ons, and various other aspects of the project. Docksal now, it's currently in use by several agencies and development shops as a tool to speed up their development through rapid code tests and rapid code deployment. It's become one of the top developer tools, including out-of-the-box support for Drupal 7, 8, and 9, WordPress, Magento, Laravel, Symfony, Grav CMS, Backdrop CMS, Hugo, Gatsby, Angular, and more being considered all the time. Now, big question is, how is Docksal different than X? Well, I need to say that I've been using only Docksal for the past couple years, so instead of a comparison between Docksal and other environments, I'm going to list some things that I feel separate it from others. Now, Docksal allows you to easily change between Docker on a virtual machine and Docker desktop for either Mac or Windows. Now, it's not really a consideration on Linux boxes because Docker runs natively on Linux. Now, before you call out that we compared containerization and virtualization back in our Intro to Docker section, remember this: Docker for Mac and Docker for Windows, let's just call it Docker Native or Docker Desktop, they are themselves virtual machines. Docker requires the Linux kernel to function, so any OS that isn't Linux-based is going to require some kind of virtualization. Now, with the simple command on Docksal, you can change from using a VM like VirtualBox to switching to your Docker Desktop, or vice versa. This is extremely beneficial because occasionally Docker Native or Docker Desktop can have different performance aspects than going through a virtual machine. Now, Docksal is written in Bash, which is the born-again shell, and it's commonplace on most Linux and Unix-based machines. So this means that on Mac OS and Linux, no additional software is needed to run Docksal, where others may require Ruby, Node.js, Python, or others. Because of this, the setup time is decreased. On Windows, the WSL, or Windows Subsystem for Linux, is required. This means that it doesn't work with older versions of Windows and requires WSL to be enabled and Ubuntu to be installed to run the commands. With the Windows exception, using Bash instead of another language keeps it in the spirit of containerization by reducing requirements of the host machine so that development tools are separated from the host machine completely. Docksal is easily configurable. It exposes many of the settings so users can extend existing services or easily create their own based on a number of languages and setup. Within the Docksal repo, there are several ready-to-install images that are available on Docker Hub for multiple setups. In addition, creating your own service is relatively straightforward, lets you tie in to the greater application without having to have an extensive knowledge of Docker services and orchestration. Docksal has a zero configuration setup. And what I mean by that is you can spin up a container for your project as simply as installing Docksal with a bash script and adding a single folder to your project. That's it. Docksal has pretty good out-of-the-box configuration for hosting providers. There are stacks in place to mimic Pantheon and Acquia, which are two of the more popular Drupal hosting providers. In addition, there are built-in commands to use Pantheon's Terminus and Platform SH's Platform CLI utilities by default, allowing easier local development closely coupled with your hosting provider. Now next, we're going to take a look at some of the stacks that are available out of the box with Docksal. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you learned something. If you've got any questions or comments, be sure to leave them down in the comment section. If there's anything else that you'd like to see me cover, I'd be more than happy to take a look. Also, please don't forget to go ahead and click that like, subscribe, share, whatever buttons you feel like. Really appreciate it. I'm JD, and I'll see you next time.